a summer Monday morning. My name is Molly McCain. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources and Institutional Equity here at St. Anselm College. I'm filling in for Neil Levesque today. He is fishing somewhere, not unexpectedly. No. He did give me a script, and he told me not to veer from it, so I will be careful. I'd like to welcome you all to the Institute of Politics here at St. Anselm College. We are extremely proud to have the Institute here and to have all of our community partners and sponsors. Please take a moment to note the sponsors. They are listed on your table cards, and we want to thank them very much for their continued support. We have wonderful partners here at St. Anselm College, but our very best partner is certainly the New England Council. Together, we've been putting on these breakfasts for many years, and we've forged many relationships through the community, and I'm sure many of you are seeing people that you look forward to seeing at these breakfasts. On that note, I'd like to introduce Jim Brett, the president of the New England Council, who will introduce our speaker. And please tell Noel I did not veer from the script. Thank you very much.
Good. I want to thank Molly, and again, I want to thank all the sponsors that make this possible. The breakfast series here wouldn't be possible without the generous support. So if you see any of the sponsors, they're right on your table. Thank them for being such a good corporate neighbor here. It's been a busy New England Council activity list in the last couple of weeks. I mean, just here alone, last week we had Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana spoke here in an adjacent room on campus. Maggie Hassan had spoke here just recently. And we had Congressman Stephen Lynch from Boston, who just spoke recently to the New England Council. And next week we have an energy forum in Boston, talking about the energy outlook in New England. We have many members of the panelists from New England Council companies, so it's a busy, busy time for the New England Council, to say the least. We've not taken our foot off the gas at all. And today we're just delighted to be able to invite back, because he's been such a frequent visitor to the New England Council, both in Washington and in New Hampshire. Whenever we call Jonathan Martin, he's always available to speak to the New England Council. So we say thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you know Jonathan Martin, he's not shy about his views and what is going on. And I have a couple of good questions for him. Many of you know him from Politico. He's the I guess the title would be the bureau chief, and then he's also the senior columnist at Politico. But you see him on so many of the talking shows and MS and NBC and so many shows. And he's sought after for his opinion, and I think you'll find him informative, entertaining, and candid, to say the least. So let's just start on a couple of common issues.
Sure.
You just wrote a piece in the magazine of Politico in June on the Prime Minister Starmer of England, and you kind of made a little comparison between him and President Trump. And the thing that I was really surprised at is, since Brexit, we've had, I don't know, with now Andy Burnham being probably the next prime minister, seven prime ministers in 10 years. Yeah. But prior to Brexit, the 20 or 30 years, 30 years, only four.
Yes.
Four prime ministers.
Yes.
What has happened in the last 10 years, both here in the United States and in England? England, we had Brexit. 10 years ago, we had Donald Trump.
Well, first of all, Jim, thank you for having me. It's good to see you guys. Thanks for having me back to New Hampshire. So many friends in the room, Jim and Jane, Tom, Terry, all my buddies here. It's great to see you guys, and thanks for the hospitality. I think Dupree is sleeping in Concord still, so we'll give Steve a pass. You know, I think the common thread is, you have two countries, cousins, sort of anchors of Western democracy, in which the traditional political institutions are not fulfilling the expectations of countries in which you have voters who have shortened attention spans and heightened expectations for what the government can deliver, and it's simply not, for the vast majority of the country, not delivering. And you've got, the big thing is the cost of living, and disproportionate divide between the haves and the have-nots. And what happens is, I think in large part because of this, we'll talk more about this later, you've got an electorate in both countries which gets fed up and every couple of years want something new. And I think Brexit and Trump are of a piece because both of them were sort of shock therapy, if you will, right? Nothing else is working. Let's just blow it all up and try something different. Well, guess what? 10 years on, they're still angry about the same problems. And so the cynicism has deepened in both countries because they said, we tried everything else. Now, even that's not working either. And so I think that there's sort of desperation in both countries, and neither has addressed what they thought would happen. And I think that's why you've seen this turnover in the UK that you alluded to. It's why in this country, every 2 years for the last decade, one chamber of Congress or the presidency is turned out. We'll probably see it again this fall, at least in one chamber of Congress. And if you ask me today, I think Democrats would probably have the advantage to take back the presidency in 28. But I think the next Democratic president could easily be a one-term president. And you've been looking at 4 one-term presidents in a row. That just hasn't happened in modern time. That's more of a throwback to the 19th century. But that's fitting, I think, because I do believe that we're in a more 19th century model of political division and cultural fragmentation today than we were in the world that all of us grew up in. So I think there's a reason why we move in tandem, right? Thatcher, 79, Reagan, 80, Clinton, 92, Blair, 97. There's a sort of symmetry in our two countries, and I think you're seeing that now, but more just with the frustration among voters.
Tomorrow night's going to be an interesting night for all of us who watch the political elections. New York City, and Donnie, the mayor, put candidates in against every incumbent Democrat congressperson in the city, with the exception of Hakeem Jeffries. What if he is successful in defeating some of the incumbent Democrat? Would he become a major player nationally?
It's a great question. He is somebody who I think is trying to assert himself, not just in New York, but I think nationally as sort of a key kingmaker ahead of the 2028 election. I think trying to push the party to a more aggressive, confrontational posture, and obviously a more left-wing posture. And we'll see if his popularity translates down the ballot tomorrow. And in the process, New York is a messy, complicated place in a lot of ways, but especially politically because you've got so many different factions within the Democratic Party there. And I think he's created some challenges, and we'll see if it pays off tomorrow. But I think that he's a stand-in. And let's be honest, there's a reason why we haven't had a mayor from New York become president of the United States. It's difficult to make that jump. I was here in 2007 and in 2008 when Rudy Giuliani was the great hero of 9/11, America's mayor, knighted by the Brits, speaking of the Brits, and they showed up here at a house party in, Somersworth, and they said, who the hell is this guy? Come on, you got to take 17 questions from us. We're in New Hampshire, right? It didn't go that well. So, New Hampshire doesn't care who you are. You got to submit. So, that's why we love you guys. So, I'm not saying that Mamdani is going to be a sort of national force. He wasn't born in the U.S. He's not eligible to run for president. But I do think he would send a statement about where the center of gravity is among Democrats. And look, you guys know this. 2028 is going to be a reckoning for both parties because both parties have lived off of Trump for 10 years. All right? Republicans in support, what's the Republican platform? Well, there's not one. It's whatever Trump is for that hour or that minute, okay? And that makes life easier when it's a personality thing, and you can just defer to whatever he's for. Tariffs one day, peace the next, and then war after. It's just, it's whatever Trump is for. But that's what has defined their party for 10 years. Okay, got that. But what are you for next? What's your platform for the future? We know that you're for Trump, but now that he's leaving the stage, what's your agenda? And they're going to have a reckoning. Are you a Reagan, Bush, Wall Street, or Joe party at your core free markets, free people? Or has the party really fundamentally changed beyond just Trump? And has the Republican Party become closer to a European-style far-right party? Blood and soil, nationalism, restrictionist on immigration and trade, and frankly, closer to a sort of Buchanan-type model, a name that you guys will recall from New Hampshire primaries past. That's going to be a test in 28. It may not play out in 28 for reasons that, because Trump could dictate the ticket and try to basically avert a primary entirely, but that reckoning is coming on their side. And at the same time, the Democrats are going to have a reckoning too. Is this party, congrats, you've lived off of Trump. He's been your best organizer, motivator, fundraiser certainly. You gotten a lot of juice out of Donald Trump for 10 years, Democrats. You won one, lost two campaigns for president, but every other campaign you did really well. I mean, Trump's the gift that keeps on giving down ballot for Democrats in elections where he's not on the ballot. But at some point, Democrats got to tell us, what are you guys for? We know that your coalition, which spans from the Cheney family to Bernie Sanders, you're anti-Trump, okay? And otherwise, you don't have a lot in common, okay? Bernie and Liz aren't doing movie night together these days. But what are you for? And to the same point that I made about the GOP, are you a traditional Obama-Clinton style left-of-center party that wants to balance capital and labor in a kind of uniquely American way? Or, speaking of Europe, are you more of a Scandinavian-style social democratic party? And has income inequality gotten to the point in this country where it's so profound and Trump is so radicalizing that no, this is not your parents' Democratic Party. This is a different Democratic Party. That reckoning is coming too on their side. Again, it may not play out purely in 28 because 28 could be the one more Trump election. And if you're Gavin Newsom or Josh Shapiro, you don't want to pick, you want to straddle and you want to make it about Trump, 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 because why? Well, that's the best unifier they have. But at some point, that reckoning is coming too. What are Democrats for? We know what you're against, but what is your proactive platform? And the two parties have got to define themselves here at some point outside of the context of Donald J. Trump.
Do you think the progressives are going to cause a problem within the Democratic Party as they gain power? You got New York City, D.C. just got Democratic Socialist. Seattle just elected a Democratic Socialist. And L.A. has a runner-up Democratic Socialist. So what is that going to do to the party?
It's a really good question. And does this play outside of big metros? So I vividly recall in 2018, similar dynamic, and history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Democrats are furious at their establishment. They can't believe that their leaders lost to Donald Trump. They blame them for being too timid, too top down, not sufficiently bottom up. Damn it, we're going to show them. And what happened? Well, down in Somerville and Cambridge, a guy named Mike Capuano lost his primary. Further down, there's a guy in Queens named Joe Crowley who lost his primary to a woman named AOC, okay? Go down 95 a little more. Bob Brady, Philadelphia. He retires because he's avoiding a primary that he knows is coming. Go out to Chicago. Dan Lipinski loses his primary. These are names from the past, but I say all that because we saw this play out in the first Trump midterm, and for the same reasons. The Democratic Party's opposition to Trump and fascism, in their eyes, is insufficient. We're going to give them that old-time religion, 140 proof. And you saw it play out mostly in these gentrified cities or gentrifying cities. And that's what's happening again now. There's a reason why this is taking place in D.C., why it's taking place in Seattle, potentially L.A. I think LA is complicated because there's a lot more working class Hispanics there. And I think why it happened in New York. I just don't know if they can carry this beyond big cities, right? And not to pander to New Hampshire, I would never do that, of course. But, far away from there. The politics of the pander in New Hampshire, I can't imagine. Look, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how democratic socialism plays, or socialism light plays in Portsmouth, in Berlin. Did I pronounce it right? And, even in smaller towns. How much clout does that have in New Hampshire? And then go further south in South Carolina. Is that going to cut any ice down there? I think that very much remains to be seen. But you lived through this in 2016. Donald Trump was never a majority candidate. Donald Trump was a plurality candidate, okay? Donald Trump benefited from a fractured field in 16 of traditional establishment-aligned candidates. Cruz, Kasich, Bush, Rubio, Sargent. You had a lot of candidates carving up the vote from the traditional right. And so what does Trump do? He gets a plurality, right? And for Democrats, that's even easier because they have a proportional primary system in which they don't have what I take all. So if you're AOC, if she runs, and you're just getting, 36, 37% of the vote in some of these states, boy, you're doing well, right? So they could have a Trump problem themselves in 2028, like you guys had in 16, in which nobody can settle on one alternative, and somebody from the left just comes through and benefits from a carved-up field.
The Republicans feel they have, with redistricting, 10-seat gain from all of the redistricting.
Yeah.
Do you believe that that number, and how do you think it's going to play out in the House?
Yeah, I think that they definitely got some seats. I think it was less than they would have ideally liked. Obviously, a place like Indiana didn't come through. Texas will be less than meets the eye because I think some of those Hispanic districts are not going to deliver a Republican. I think they were borrowing those voters for one cycle. Those are not Republican voters in South Texas, especially after ice raids. Are yanking gardeners and housekeepers for front yards. And I think that they'll gain some seats, but Democrats will get some of theirs in California. I think the House will be closer because of it. I mean, I think all things being equal, this would have been a big Democratic House year. I think it's going to be less now because of the reapportionment. I think the bigger issue, though, there's just less competitive seats, right? There's just, because of reapportionment, but also because of polarization, there's just less seats up for grabs in this country. I think about 2018, I think about 2006. Those were the big Democratic House years, 2010 on the Republican side. There's just not that many seats up for grabs, right? They don't really exist. Think about New England. I mean, the most obvious one is the rural seat in Maine. Maine 2 is Jared Golden, but that's the exception, right? So there's just not many places to grab seats. But for Democrats, it doesn't matter because the Republicans have a 1.5 seat majority in the House, so they don't have to win a lot. They get 6 seats, and that's enough, right? So.
Speaking of races, there's 2 competitive races here in New England.
I heard about that, yeah.
One here in New Hampshire at the Senate race, and then in Maine. Your thoughts on any of them?
I mean, Katie Bernadette, we'll start with Maine because obviously it's gotten so much national attention. Oh my gosh. This is like Janet Mills' secret plan for Maine tourism dollars. It was all a long con by Governor Mills. No, I'm kidding. She'd be pissed if she heard that. But it is going to be great for the Maine economy. It would have been better if there was a primary in June there because folks like me are scared the weather would have gone up there in June for the end of the primary. But Maine is going to get more national attention this year I think it may have ever gotten for a statewide race because it's really, it's a stand-in for the Democratic fight that I alluded to, right, which is what party are we going to be? And Plattner obviously reflects the Mamdani wing. He happens to have the same consultants as Mamdani as well. Not a coincidence there. Plattner is the clenched fist. Nope, we're not going to be what we were. We have to be more combative, more assertive because the times demand it. And, the question is he so flawed? Is there so much baggage that ultimately undermines him? Or are overthinking it? And is this a single issue election? And the issue ain't his old Reddit posts, but the issue is Donald J. Trump. And maybe it's just that simple. And this is, speaking of the UK, this is a parliamentary race. And if that's the case, Collins can't overcome that because they're pulling the lever for Team Blue, not Susan Collins or anything else. It's just all about Trump. We just don't know. I think part of that will hinge on what more is there on Plattner to come. But it is going to be a Donnybrook. And Sarah Gideon's still sitting on like $30 million. I mean, Plattner and Collins are going to have $100 million apiece at the end of this campaign. Whoever's running to Portland and Bangor TV, they're going to do really, really well because there's going to be so much cash spent. And I think, the question for Maine in part will be, can Collins localize this? I'm the appropriations chair. I will be as long as we have the majority. Why would you want to give that up? A state that is, I think the oldest state in the country, sprawling state, a state that's got unique needs. I think she'll try to leverage that. I just don't know if that still works in an era in which everything is Trump, but we'll find out. It'll be incredibly fascinating, and I have some lobster rolls in my future, I think. In New Hampshire, I think the question here is just, can the national environment get a little better for the Republicans? Look, if it's Labor Day and Trump is, mid-30s or worse in New Hampshire, I just don't think it's doable for Sununu. It's a great last name. Obviously, brother was governor. He was senator. Father was governor. I just think politics is tribal, and I come back to a single-issue election. If the issue is Trump, I think that's that for Sununu. But he's not running against Jean Shaheen, He's running against somebody else. So I think that could be a race that comes on late. I just think that if you're Sununu, you got to get a little better national environment. You can't have the wind blowing in your face like it is right now.
You've been conducting the On the Road series.
That's the plug.
Yeah, with good writers get good tips. Be patient. The series of people that you've seen.
Yes.
Fascinating. So give us a little insight.
Sure.
A couple of them. One, you had crab cakes with the governor, Gus Moore of Maryland, and then you also had an opportunity to have a heaping full of pastrami.
Oh my gosh, Pritzker.
The Pritzker, the governor.
Well, you didn't need that.
Why don't we talk about those two?
Sure. So the idea, Lord knows the world doesn't need more podcasts, right? And so our folks came to me and said, you got to do something. You should, create a podcast. I don't want to do a podcast. We don't need more podcasts. They said, well, we know that you like to travel. Yeah, well, that's true. We know you like to eat. That's definitely true. And we know that you're exposing a lot of meals on us. Well, okay, guilty. So why don't we just send you out there? You can do what you always do, which is you travel the country and you have these decadent meals with politicians and you expense us. So why don't we just do that? We'll put it on tape, and you can listen to it as a podcast or watch it on YouTube. I said, okay, fine, we'll give it a shot. So we've done that. Season 1's wrapped up. Mostly governors. We'll take Moore first. So I did Wes Moore and some softball-sized crab cakes that were incredible. But no F-word, no filler here. No filler. It was all crab, no cake. It was fantastic in Baltimore. And, Moore is a natural political athlete. I mean, if he walked into the room where Jim is standing over there, he would fill this place. If he comes up here for politics and eggs, there's a magnetism there. He's got stuff you can't teach. But I wonder if, to keep the sports thing going, I wonder if he's a little too raw. It's like, not sure if he can step in on day one and start in the NBA. But he's got real talent. We'll see if he can go this time around. Part of his challenge is he's got a little bit of the Biden problem, no offense, Terry, which is he just can't help but gild the lily. Biden was famous for this. In fact, there's a legendary clip from 1987, so you may have seen in New Hampshire, where you get on C-SPAN live. Go to the White House, he gets into this shouting match with some guy questioning his law school credentials. So classic New Hampshire town, House party. Call on the phone, it's legendary. Biden was always inflating or exaggerating a little bit his credentials, which a lot of politicians do, but Moore's got a little bit of that problem. Pritzker is interesting, right? The old saw in New Hampshire and beyond is, primaries don't end, they just run out of money. Pritzker's never going to have that problem. His primaries never going to run out of money, right? You can self-fund. And Pritzker is interesting. He's very affable. Big, husky Chicago guy, warm, engaging. I think he'll have a real interesting opening here in New Hampshire because he's very affable and approachable. The question there is, what's the pitch? There's no Illinois miracle, to put it mildly, right? I mean, he's the governor of Illinois. He's from Chicago, a state that brings some baggage. It's kind of like Bob's hometown is New Orleans. You say New Orleans politician, and he sort of evokes a certain image in your head, right? And I think if you're Pritzker, it's not corruption. It's more just, what have you done there to make things better? Obviously, it's a challenging time for a place like Illinois. If Pritzker does have a shot, I think it'll be in part because of his personal skills, but also his money, but also because he has the potential to sort of be the Goldilocks candidate. He's not too moderate for the progressives, but he's not too far left for the center. He's a billionaire, and he was a venture capital guy, and he's the heir to the Hyatt hotel fortune. So the center isn't wary of him. The business crowd will think he's one of them, but the left doesn't view him as totally hostile either, so he can kind of balance both.
What's the relationship between Rahm Emanuel and Pritzker?
Not great. That town is not big enough to hold both of those men. Boy, oh boy, is that going to be fun. But this is actually a great question because Rahm and the Dairy crowd, the sort of political crowd in Chicago, right? The Tom Rath of Chicago, like that crowd. They always viewed Pritzker as the money guy, right? He was the money guy over on the Gold Coast. The Pritzker's names are on every damn building in Chicago, right? They're an enormous philanthropic family. You go to the Art Institute, you go to the Field Museum, and Penny Pritzker, Jamie Pritzker. And so you guys know how this is in politics. If you're a candidate or if you're an operative, you view money guys, the finance crowd, in a certain way. And I think the old guard, the Rahms of the world, they still have this view of Pritzker as, you call him for a check. He's not one of us. He's not a principal. He's not part of the club. He's just a donor. The donor is dripping off their tongue. Donor, right? Jim knows what I'm talking about, right? And I think for a lot of them, it's hard to see. And I think Rahm is part of that. He sees JB as a donor. And JB is going to be a 3-term governor of one of the biggest states in the country. He's a formidable figure. But in his own hometown, the view of him among the insiders is a little dated, frankly. So I think JB knows that he's looked at that way by Rahm. He doesn't like it. And I think Rahm doesn't take JB that seriously because he's like, well, I was working in the Clinton White House. I was working in the Obama White House. This guy was writing checks. So I think there's a little bit of wariness there between them. And that's going to be fun watching those two guys go at it.
So the governor showed his influence by getting the lieutenant governor nominated to the United States.
He sure did. And a few bucks, too. Yeah. That didn't hurt either.
No.
My prediction is that the fascinating primary in New Hampshire, within a primary here, if it does play out, Pritzker I'll put aside for a minute. I think the Pete Buttigieg versus Rahm Emanuel sub-primary here is going to be really interesting because you've got two candidates who are very articulate, deeply informed, and they're going to appeal to a certain kind of New Hampshire voter. You go to places like Hanover or Keene or down on the seacoast, these 6-figure communities, postgraduate degrees, boy, I mean, center-left type voters. I mean, they're just wired for those kind of voters, right? I was reading in the Times Sunday, so that kind of voter, right? Or even better, I was reading in the London Review of Books the other day. Is that kind of demo, right? They're in a feast with those kind of voters, right? And independents and Republicans who cross over, especially if the Republican primary is a Trump coronation. I mean, you saw it here with Nikki. I mean, there's going to be plenty of, centrist voters up for grabs. And if they play in the Democratic primary, boy, the Pete versus Rahm thing's going to be so. If Rahm's got a shot, it's going to be here, right? I mean, he's going to have to come out of here. He's going to need the Indies and Republicans.
Two other governors you had a chance to sit with, Governor Shapiro and Governor Newsom.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on those two?
Right now, early days, but you put them a little higher in the pecking order. For Newsom, because he's got, at this stage, at least pretty good name ID in the Democratic Party. He's seen as somebody who punches Trump in the mouth, which for Democrats is like priority 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6. And he does it in sort of a way that is trolling, and they kind of like it. Also, as Trump would say, Gavin looks the part. I mean, if Gavin walked in the room here, I mean, he is a handsome man. And He's got a swagger to him. I was at the Obama Library open last week in Chicago. Pete's there, Mark Kelly is there, Rahm Emanuel, of course, is there, JB is there, Shapiro is there, Gavin's there. One person had a de facto impromptu photo line after the event in the crowd, and you can guess who it was. It was the tall, good-looking governor of California. I walk over to say hello, and this guy's got a line of folks posing for pictures with him. And, you can't teach that. You get that kind of celebrity, that kind of magnetism, it can go a long way. The question I have for Newsom is, can you stay on the high wire for 2 years? Right? You come through a place like New Hampshire, boy, you're going to be put through your paces, and you go to the House party, and you're going to be questioned and challenged in ways that, are you a progressive? Are you a moderate? Well, I don't pick sides. Come on, man. Nope, that ain't good enough here. Can you stay on the high wire for 2 years? That has rarely happened in American politics, right? I don't care who they are. Front runners always face a test, and usually it happens here. So can Gavin do? Also, this DOJ stuff with Gavin and his wife, it could help him. It could also scuff him up a little bit too, I think. I'd keep an eye on that. Shapiro, I think, is endlessly interesting. I think Shapiro is the safe, reliable boy next door. Right? 30-year mortgage, good, steady work. Why don't you go talk to the nice boy next door? Here's chasing these crazy kids down the street with their motorcycles and tattoos. We're the nice boy next door. Why don't you go marry him, right? He's solid and steady and reliable, and he's going to be a good owner for this family. Okay? I'll never forget this. I had a Democratic pollster say, Shapiro's problem, what's that? It's easy to fall in like with Josh. It's easy to fall in like with Josh. He's never going to make you swoon. He's never going to be Obama. He ain't going to be Mom Donnie. He ain't going to be, fill in the blank rock star, right? And do Democrats want that? Democrats do have a type of voters, right? And he's the sensible pick. Now, that said, in 20, Democrats made a sensible pick, right? They did pick what was effectively the boy next door, and with Biden. Now, it took 17 different things to happen for that to occur, but Democrats did pick the sensible choice in 20. I just don't know if Shapiro can pull that off in 28, especially if 28 is more like a lot of these open seat Democratic races, right? Look at the history of Democratic politics. When they win the presidency, JFK, Carter, Clinton, Obama, they typically win with candidates who are dynamic, exciting, tomorrow, fresh face. Can Shapiro be that? Potentially. He's not going to blow the roof off. Which brings me to the one I just wrote about, which I think you do see buzz about, which is John Ossoff in Georgia. Right. He's 39 years old. He is buzzing around the internet with these videos, and he's very articulate, and he's the type Democrats typically like. He's got a mix of outsider and insider credentials. Again, Democrats like that. Democrats like that, who can play in a lot of different kind of rooms, outsider and insider. And I think he has that potential to sort of do that. But I wouldn't discount Shapiro. He has won Pennsylvania, or he will have won Pennsylvania 4 times statewide. Look, if you're a Democrat and you win PA 4 times in this age, automatically that makes you a serious contender. So, not dynamic. Politics are a little too moderate for what the party is today. But let's say that the primary order is New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, Michigan, and then they're probably going to throw in a 5th, whether it's Virginia or North Carolina. That's not Queens. That's not the west side of LA. Those are different places. So I don't know if being a moderate's a bad thing in those places, right?
We spent a good portion of time talking about all the Democratic potential candidates. Yeah. What about the other side? Is it J.D., or is he going to be contested by, the Secretary of State?
Speaking of if you want to know what Donald Trump thinks, just ask him. It's like the weather in New England. He will blurt it out eventually. Everybody in Republican politics knows, everybody in politics knows that Marco is the superior athlete. Right? You don't have to take my word for it. It's just self-evident at this point. Trump didn't want a primary in 24. You guys remember this. He told Ronna McDaniel, cancel the primary. I don't want to have a primary. And I can't do that. Okay, I'll cancel the road debates. I can't do that either. But he never showed up at the debates. He didn't want a primary in 24. I don't think he's going to want a primary in 28. The two worst words in the English language to Donald Trump are lame duck. Because lame duck means the cameras have gone. The parade's moved on. He doesn't want to be a lame duck. The last thing Trump wants, can you imagine one day Trump comes down in the Oval Office and there's no cameras there? I mean, can't you bar the door, right? So he doesn't want a primary. He doesn't want to be a lame duck for the final year and a half. I think Trump is going to have one half The Apprentice, one half The Bachelor. They're all going to have to come to the West Wing, County Rose. They've got the wet outside. There's going to be good mood lighting in the Oval Office. So I'm going to be on TV. I'll go, get to watch. I'm half kidding, but only half. I think Trump wants to do a coronation, Jim. I think he wants to do an arrangement of some kind. They did DocuSign last week for the end of the Iran war. They did DocuSign. There's going to be a deal. Okay, he wants to wire this. Again, don't take my word for it. He has said this once every 6 weeks for the last 2 years. Well, we got JD, we got Marco. They're both great. They're doing a great job. They'd be a great team. I think he can see the ticket in his mind, and he would love to create that ticket. The question is, who's the senior partner in that ticket? Can you tell a sitting vice president to stay vice president, and we're going to leapfrog you with the Secretary of State? If I was sitting here 10 years ago, I'd say that's silly, that's folly. Of course you can't do that. But I can't say that's crazy now because it's the Trump era, so maybe it is possible. I just think he's going to try to wire this. I'll end with this. I don't think if it is Vance or if it is Marco, I don't think that their threat's going to be Ted Cruz or Glenn Youngkin. I think their threat is not going to be from the old guard or from what was. I think the threat, and I think Vance smells this, I think the threat's going to be from the far right. I mean, I think the reason why Vance, if you follow Vance closely, Vance is so completely consumed with what the far right crowd, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, what are they thinking and saying? On Epstein, on the Iran war, on AI, he knows that far right faction poses a threat, and he wants to placate them. And I think that could be, if there's a primary in 28, I don't think it's going to be Marco versus JD. I think they figured that out internally. I think the primary would be, and you're going to laugh at me, I think the primary would be somebody from the entertainment wing of the right jumps in. Because if you're Tucker, or fill in the blank, you say, Donald Trump was a two-term president. Why can't I do it too?
Do you think Iran is going to be a major issue in the fall campaign?
I don't want to dodge you. I would never do that, of course. I'm not a politician. But I think I would have to put off that answer because we just don't know. I mean, Lindsey Graham was on TV yesterday saying if you guys, meaning the Iranians, don't fulfill your end of the bargain, we're going to retake control of the straits. And so, if Trump, so much this is Trump psychology, right? If guys like Lindsey can leverage Trump and tell Trump in so many words that he's getting played and the Iranians are doing to you what they did to Obama, right? Which is always the magic words. You're Obama, right? If that's the case, then maybe they can get Trump to go back in and restart the blockade. I think Trump wants to declare victory and go home. I think Trump wants to end this. Again, just look at what he says. How many times has he invoked Hoover since last week, right? The global economy was going to collapse. I don't want to be Hoover. He was looking for an off-ramp after the first week, and he didn't do it because they kept citing Obama, and he kept getting his back up. But eventually, I think gas prices $5 a gallon. He was ready for this thing to be over. So today, the market's in good shape. Oil's coming down. The question is, can the Iranians at least fake it to give Trump some cover, right? If the Iranians humiliate Trump, I think the temptation for Trump would be more significant. But as long as Trump can declare victory and say, the economy's gangbusters again, the streets are open, we're back. As long as he can sell it, I don't think Trump wants to restart hostilities. He didn't want ground troops there. He didn't want them to go get the nuclear dust. He didn't want them to go reopen the straits with force. I don't think he wants to do that. I just don't think he wants to do that unless he's totally humiliated by the Iranians.
There seems to be some turmoil within the Republican Senate caucus. You get Mike Lee, who's now inviting the president to come up and speak to the caucus. and Mike is leading the effort on the SAVE Act, the bill, that the majority leader is saying basically, why are we spending time and energy on a bill that we cannot get enough votes on? We got to move on. But he sort of circumvented around the majority leader and working with the senator from Florida to invite the president up to say, hey, make the pitch to the SAVE Act. So
oh my gosh,
what's going on there?
To be flying around in that lunch this week. I talked to a Republican senator and a senior Trump staffer yesterday, and both of them said the same thing, which is Thune just needs to be caught trying. Which is to say, if Thune can just show Trump he's trying to pass the SAVE Act, just bring it up a few more times, and just, it's not great messaging. It does show it's disorder in the ranks. But if you want to placate Trump and get him off this, then you got to show him that you're trying. And the votes aren't there. He doesn't believe you if you just say it, and you got to show him. And so bring it up again. And I think that may be where this lands, that Thune's got to have this thing fail a couple times. The SAVE Act is basically this expansive voter ID bill that a few Republican senators have convinced Trump is going to be the panacea to save the midterms. Of course, that's not the case, but Trump is convinced it will because they think that that's going to be their great panacea. And so it doesn't have the votes to pass. It doesn't have 60. It barely even has 50. So it can't pass the Senate. But Thune is not energetic enough in the eyes of the Trump folks to try to get this thing done. At heart, though, this is a culture clash, okay? John Thune is from the Reagan Party. John Thune is a family man who wants to go home and play with his grandkids in Sioux Falls, South Dakota every weekend. He ain't going to Mar-a-Lago with the Silicon crowd, okay? This is not his thing. That's just not who he is, right? And with Trump, you got to be buddy-buddy. You got to go over there and hang out with him and shoot the breeze, and that's just not what Thune is. And you look at Thune's body language. Listen to his tone. He can't hide it. He's very unhappy with this. This is not what he signed up for. And so I think, yeah, it's the SAVE Act, but really the issue is there's never been a great connection there, and it's broken down in part because Trump's unpopular, and Thune's worried about losing the Senate because of Trump's unpopularity.
Isn't there also a lot of dissension with the president weighing in on Senator Cornyn?
Oh my gosh!
Not endorsing in the last week.
So Trump first of all takes out Cassidy with no heads up. Now Cassidy voted to impeach Trump in 2021. Somewhat understandable, but what's Cornyn's sin? You know, what's Cornyn's transgression, right? And to go on there in the runoff, again, no heads up. He just shows up and endorses Paxton after all the money spent on Cornyn, and now you're going to invite $100 million more to be spent to save Paxton. So you got those two Senate races. At the same time, Trump abruptly declares he wants to create this slush fund to give money to people targeted by DOJ, as he puts it, and then he names Bill Pulte, who's a 38-year-old, a real estate heir, who's his bulldog at the housing department to run the country's, intelligence. So you add all that up in a period of about 6 weeks, and Republican senators, they're not just mad, they're embarrassed. It's embarrassing that they just, because they know that we know that they hate it, and they don't want to be asked about it, and they resent it. And I think that is definitely a big part of it. And the Senate, more than the House, is still a vestige of what the party was, right? You got people there like, Susan Collins, obviously, but Sean Capito or John Cornyn. It's just, it's still a Bushy kind of party, and it's not a Trump party. Now, there's Trumpy elements there, but they're still a little bit outnumbered,
We have a couple minutes for questions. Anybody have a question to ask Jonathan?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Yes.
LCB's got a question.
All right. Go ahead.
Rob Warner.
Rob Warner, conservation. Yeah. Great op-ed you wrote just recently. I had a chance to read it.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah.
Rob Warner, League of Conservation Voters. Jonathan, last year you wrote an article making the case that New Hampshire would reclaim its primacy.
I did.
And do so that way.
I was prescient, I think. I wrote this last year, which is, I think Ray Buckley should be a little bit more humble, and not entitled about New Hampshire's role as first in the nation. Not that New Hampshire would ever be entitled about that, but I think this would wind up being back to where it was, in large part, because what's the threat? What's the leverage? What's the stick that Democrats have? We're going to strip you of your delegates? No, you're not. You're going to give them back every summer like you have in the past, right? I've seen the movie before. The only leverage that the DNC has is taking your delegates away, and then in the name of party unity, at every convention over the summer, they give them back, right? So you can't keep crying wolf, right? And so I think New Hampshire is going to start the process again. I feel pretty confident about that. I wouldn't go to the bank with it, but I feel pretty confident about that. I think Nevada is going to be in the top 4, potentially second. I think South Carolina will be back there. Clyburn's coming back. South Carolina's coming back. But Clyburn doesn't want South Carolina to be first. He said this publicly and privately. He wants South Carolina to be the first in the South because of what happened in 20. Because South Carolina decides the nominee. You guys know this. I don't know New Hampshire are the widowers, the vetters. You guys just narrow the field. You kick the tires and make it a 6-person field instead of a 20-person field, right? And South Carolina is later, but that's great for them because they're the final springboard. So I think South Carolina's 3rd or 4th. Michigan's probably the Midwestern state, although Iowa could go rogue here. Kind of watching that closely. If this guy Rob Sand wins the governorship, young and ambitious in Iowa, I can see a scenario where he tries to restart the Iowa caucuses off the books, and we'll see how that goes. And then I think there'll be one more state. My understanding is it'll be North Carolina or Virginia, and I'm not sure if they're in that first window, or maybe soon after. But I think that's basically it. This, though, the DNC sanctioning, it's important, but what really matters is the candidates. They vote with their feet. If they're coming here, and if folks like me are coming here to see them, that is the primary, right? I mean, that's the primary. So I think they're going to keep coming. I mean, Ron just did a bike ride, from wherever to wherever. My God. Too much spandex, Ron. Too much spandex, man. You're a 65-year-old man. Just come on. Wear khakis, okay? Jesus. But, Ron's up here. Pritzker's been here, I know. You'll see. I'm sure Shapiro and Bashir will come up here this year under the auspices of campaigning for a great candidate for governor. What was her name again? You'll see that happen. So I think New Hampshire's going to still be New Hampshire as long as those folks are going to come here, So.
Other questions? Gentlemen, you had a hand raised.
Hi, I'm a volunteer with AARP.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
One thing you haven't mentioned that Democrats are always mentioning is affordability, and I want to pair that with the Democrats are all talking about affordability. The other thing is that's looming and would presumably have some impact on 28 is the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yes.
And what's going to happen with that. How do you think those issues play together?
That's a good New Hampshire question. Yeah, I think about a house party down in Hampton Falls or something. Give me your 10-point plan. I'll have a copy of it after, too. God love you, man. I'll talk to your staffer. I know from you. Okay, good. Yes, sir. I've been there. First of all, I think the first question we had was about the symmetry between the UK and the US. I think the failures of the establishment in both countries and the reason why you have massive turnover and voter angst in both countries and 7 prime ministers in 10 years is because more than anything else of affordability. I mean, I think people are paying too much. The quality of life is not what it was. People feel like their kids are not going to have the same life they did. And there's a deep, profound cynicism and a lack of faith, not just in government, but in every institution. People believe nothing's on the level anymore. I mean, Pew had 17% of Americans having faith in their government. 17% of the country believes the government's trying to do the right thing. We got big problems, right? I think affordability is the big one, but the deeper issue is just this lack of faith and just this sense that nothing's on the level anymore. It's just a disillusionment with what the country is, right? And I see it all the time. This is a separate conversation than this morning, but I think a lot of it stems from the fracturing of our country because of technology. On the issue of Social Security, look, neither party wants to address this, right? I think you'll have a candidate up here in 28, it may be Ron, it may be somebody else, who says out loud that we got to do something about it, and that may mean having to raise taxes or fees or find ways to do benefit cuts. They won't put it like that, but that'll be the upshot of it. That's where this is obviously going. You can't keep deficit spending forever. At some point, the interest rates, the bond markets are going to take note. So it's going to have to be addressed here at some point. We have a generational crisis coming because we haven't had the replacement with childbirth to pay for the boomers' retirement. So that's going to come a cropper, right? And, you want to close down the borders? Okay, well, that's a problem for the workforce, and it's a problem for paying off the pensions of everybody else in our generation. So that issue ain't going away, and I think if it's going to be litigated anywhere, it's going to be here in New Hampshire. I can see it right now. The deficit, the red ink, how about the red scare? Let's talk about that. That's going to happen here, I'm sure. It's going to be central. But again, Trump has put off so many of these debates because so much of our conversation is, did you see what Trump just said on Easter morning? He said, what? Did you see this? Honey, wake up. Trump just said the Easter bunny is real. I mean, whatever, And Democrats are high-budget and Republicans are like around their doors and running. And I didn't see it. I missed that. That's our life for a decade. Which, like, for me, I get a lot of this. You guys must love Trump. He's great box office for you guys. I say, you ever had cotton candy for dinner? You ever had it for 10 years in a row? You kind of miss a well-balanced meal. You have some salmon, some broccoli, It's not edifying after a while, and it puts off the big questions that are a little bit less sexy, but that are central, right? When everything is Trump and what Trump just said or did, Republicans like it, or some of them do, some of them are embarrassed by it. Democrats, obviously benefit from it or organize around it, but it avoids central, serious questions about the country.
Well, don't you think the issue of the day today will be the reflecting pool? How do we change it from...
Precisely. Who spiked it? What's going on? But actually, you know what? That's where Trump's passion is. I mean, he spends his days consumed with these White House projects or Washington like Monument. I was being a smartass the other day. I said this out loud, but Trump's biggest second-term domestic accomplishment could actually be like cleaning up Washington, like parks and monuments. That's what he loves. He's a builder, right? He's going back to, it's full circle again, right? He's like, once again, trying to build stuff or trying to, renovate stuff. But that's where his passion is. I mean, he's consumed with this. And, it's for the 250th. No, it's not. It's what he likes to do, right? But no, that's precisely right. When we're talking about algae in the reflecting pool, we're not talking about, our careening out of control deficit spending.
Well, one maybe final question. Just wait for the mic, sir. Identify yourself.
Nobody's asked about rye heap yet. So this is not a New Hampshire crowd. Come on, wait for rye heap.
This was not going to be a rye heap question, but I can turn it into one. Nate Schrader, New England College, Department of Politics.
Yes, sir.
My question is about Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I've heard of her.
You've heard of her. I think she's still the candidate. If I had to, I'm not a gambler, but if I had to bet money, I'd still bet money on Kamala Harris being in the final two, maybe in the Democratic.
Totally rational. Yeah.
But why are so many people, it seems like, at least in the pundit class, writing her off right now? Because I look at it from the standpoint of, my background is party organizations, studying party organizations. Look who runs for delegate position.
Yes.
It's people who are party loyalists and people that are going to have a loyalty to her, to people like the Bidens, the Obamas, but to her. And it depends who wins those delegate slots, and she's going to have loyalty there among those folks, at least in...
I'm listening to Joe McQuaid, and I'm trying to envision Joe McQuaid thinking about J.D. Vance versus Kamala Harris general election. Joe, what did I do with this? Lord, help me. We got the sort of, Buchanan versus Kamala. Wouldn't find out with the UL, that's for sure. So I agree. I think Kamala Harris has been written off because And I understand this view. Democrats tend to move on. Democrats leave their candidates by the side of the road. Democrats are mean to their losers, okay? All right, Mondale, Dukakis, Gore, Kerry. The only one who got picked back up, although Hillary and Biden didn't lose generals, they lost primaries, right? But Democrats tend to leave their wounded from general elections on the side of the road, to be harsh about it. Democrats find what's next, and because of that, I just think there's this sense of course, Democrats are going to move forward. I've done these road shows, and every Democrat that I ask about Kamala, they hate being asked about her because they don't want to offend her or her supporters. But it's all these euphemisms. Well, the party wants to move ahead, move forward. We're going to turn the page. It's like all these euphemisms, right? They don't. So the party leaders don't want her, but you're right. The voters, there's still support. The question is this: how much of that is residual name ID? Right? How much of that is what Lieberman had after 2000, what Kerry had after 2004, what Gore had after 2000? It's early days, and how much of that, and does she know, this is important, does she know that polling is based on name ID? Or does she think that that's real support? I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't rule out her running. She didn't run for governor of California because she wanted to keep this possibility alive. She knows the polling, and she believes that she'd be a formidable candidate. If you're Kamala Harris, you try to skip New Hampshire, you're the former nominee of your party. How are you going to pick and choose states to skip, right? I think she'd have some challenges here. But yeah, you're right. I think she would start in pretty serious shape. What I wonder is this, and I wrote something about this back in March or April. She'll put this off for a while, but she'll start making some calls after the midterms. November, December, January, and she picks up the phone and she calls the Clintons, or she calls the Obamas, or she calls, some big prominent figures, donors, labor folks. I'm thinking about this, what do you think, right? And the answer on those calls is polite, but it's not, go for it. We're on board from day one. It's going to be polite, but it's going to be, And I wonder if she gets that. I think she'll put it off for as long as she can. Because when you say no, it's no forever. This is her last shot, right? This is it. She doesn't want to say no. And so I think she'll put it off. And I think ultimately, if she doesn't run, I think there's opportunities for her. I don't know. I mean, could she be the AG? She's probably too old to be on the court because you don't want to pick somebody on the court who's 60. But she could be a big ambassador. I mean, I mentioned Mondale. Mondale got smoked in '84, but was a good, respected figure, and Clinton made her ambassador to Japan. Could she be ambassador to a big country like that? Would she want to be that? I don't know. But you're right. She's not going to talk about enough because there's this assumption that the party's going to move on, with or without her. And they might. That's the history. But you can't discount her entirely. She sold a lot of books, and she has a lot of goodwill. And again, she ran against Trump, and the party loathes Trump. Right? And, I told you so. I tried to warn you, And also, I think Biden gets more of the blame than her for 24. Justifiably, too, Anybody else?
Speaking of moving on, and also books, this is... oh, my God! This will not... Still available on Amazon.com, by the way. Great summer writer, Jonathan Martin. For a very modest fee. Absolutely. Any takes from this book you want to mention?
We came up with that title in the fall of 2021, This Will Not Pass. And the great part about the title was, it could apply to whatever you wanted to apply to. It was like Barack Obama in 2008. It was whatever you wanted him to be, right? And that title has held up pretty damn well. This will not pass because here we are. You mentioned the UK this morning. We're still facing the fundamental challenges of our time, which is a deep distrust and a sense that politics is broken, and that hasn't changed. But it's not broken. This group, Politics and Eggs, Women Council, what a treat to be back here with you guys. I mean this. I'm not pandering. I love being up here. It is such fun, especially from May to October.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Who's your guest? Contract. Who's the next one? Who is this guest for the next part?
All right, so I'm breaking some news here. Season 2 begins in July, and I'm really excited. We're going to start in North Dakota, and I'll tell you why. Some of you may know this. North Dakota is the future home of the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library. Doug Burgum, former governor, now Interior Secretary, when he's not cleaning out the reflecting pool, has been spending a lot of his time and money, and he's got plenty of it, both, trying to build, and he finally got this thing done. They're building at the foot of the Teddy Roosevelt National Park in the Badlands, Medora, North Dakota, a fantastic presidential library. So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to interview a handful of North Dakota politicians who've been involved in this and talk about Teddy and about what this means to the country and to the state. And it's going to be some of the best video. I can't guarantee you that we're going to have Buffalo, but we're going to look really hard for Buffalo to go